Mackenzie Wade never imagined that playing piano for a cranky elderly woman would completely change her life, much less that this lady would be the mother of one of the most powerful and feared men in the country. When she accepted the internship at St. Teresa's Charitable Hospital in Cleveland, Oak, she thought she was finally taking the first step toward realizing her dream, creating a community clinic. But while her delicate hands caressed the keys of the old piano in the room of Mercedes Dean, a 72-year-old woman, terminal, sour as a lemon, and lonely as an abandoned lighthouse, Mackenzie had no idea that each note played was building a direct bridge to the armored heart of Jeremiah Dean. The magnate who commanded the luxurious LifeLux network never visited his mother until he discovered that a young nurse had achieved the impossible, making Mercedes smile. And when two wounded souls meet, not all the money in the world can predict what happens next. "That girl is as persistent as a wart," grumbled Mercedes Dean, adjusting herself in the hospital bed while watching Mackenzie arrange the fresh flowers in the vase. "But she plays piano like an angel." Mackenzie smiled, accustomed to her most challenging patient's daily grumbling. She had been caring for Mercedes for 3 months and had already discovered that behind that hard shell existed a woman who had simply forgotten how to be loved. "Do you prefer Chopin or Debussy today?" she asked, smoothing the hospital sheet with the same care she would give her own grandmother. "Doesn't matter, just don't play those sappy little songs the other nurses love." Mackenzie laughed softly. Mercedes was an expert at feigning indifference, but Mackenzie had already noticed how her eyes would soften when she played. The small electric piano she had brought from home had transformed that sterile room into something warmer, more human. "Mrs. Dean, you never told me how you met your husband," said Mackenzie, adjusting the pillows. "Ah, my dear, it was in a time when men still knew what it meant to court a woman," Mercedes sighed, with a rare sparkle in her eyes. "Charles was a doctor. I was a nurse. We worked at the same hospital. He used to call me his angel in a white coat." Mackenzie sat in the chair beside the bed, knowing that Mercedes was entering one of her rare moments of vulnerability. "And Mr. Jeremiah? Does he take after his father?" Mercedes' face closed instantly. "My son." She paused as if carefully choosing her words. "Jeremiah inherited his father's intelligence, but also his stubbornness. And after Charles died, he turned to stone. He worked so much he forgot how to live. Have you tried talking to him about this?" Mercedes let out a bitter laugh. "My dear, Jeremiah only talks to me about doctors, treatments, and business. For him, showing affection is synonymous with weakness. He thinks he can command the whole world, but can't even visit his own mother without seeming like he's fulfilling a business obligation." Mackenzie felt her heart tighten. She knew well the pain of family abandonment. After all, she had been raised only by Grandma Rita after her father disappeared and her mother died. But something about the way Mercedes spoke of her son intrigued her. There was love there, hidden under layers of hurt and wounded pride. "Would you like me to play that song that helps you sleep better?" offered Mackenzie, getting up toward the piano. "You can." "And Mackenzie?" Mercedes hesitated. "Thank you for being so persistent with me." Mackenzie smiled, beginning to play a soft melody by Ludovico Einaudi. It was in these moments that she was certain she had chosen the right profession. Caring for people wasn't just about medications and procedures. It was about seeing the humanity behind the pain. What she didn't know was that outside the room, a masculine shadow had stopped in the corridor upon hearing the music. Jeremiah Dean, who had come to make his monthly obligatory visit to his mother, stood motionless for several minutes, listening to a melody that made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't explain. When Mackenzie finished playing and left the room to get the evening medications, she almost bumped into a tall man with broad shoulders, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her annual salary. "Excuse me," she said automatically, trying to step aside. "Are you the intern?" The voice was deep, authoritative. Mackenzie looked up and found herself facing a face she had only seen in business magazines. Square jaw, dark and penetrating eyes, black hair with some grey strands at the temples. Jeremiah Dean in person. "Yes, sir, Mackenzie Wade." She extended her hand, trying not to show nervousness. He looked at the extended hand for a second before shaking it briefly. His skin was warm and calloused, surprising her. "How is my mother?" "Well, considering—" Mackenzie measured her words. "She's a strong woman and very intelligent." "Intelligent and impossible," he murmured, more to himself. "Actually, Mr. Dean, I think she's just lonely." Jeremiah stared at her with an intensity that made Mackenzie regret speaking. Who was she to give opinions about his family? "Sorry, I shouldn't have—" "What do you do with her?" he interrupted. "I mean, besides basic medical care, we talk. She tells me stories about the hospital where she met your father, and I—" Mackenzie hesitated. "I play piano for her." "Piano?" "Yes, classical music mainly. It helps her relax and it works." Mackenzie nodded, surprised by the genuine interest in his voice. "Mrs. Dean has had insomnia for months. After I started playing for her, she sleeps better and laughs more too." Jeremiah was silent for a long moment, processing this information. His mother, the woman who had turned his childhood into a constant search for approval, was laughing. "How long do you plan to stay here?" he asked finally. "My internship ends in 6 months, but I hope to get a permanent position." "And then?" Mackenzie smiled, a dreamy gleam in her eyes. "I want to work with palliative care, and someday, who knows, open a community clinic. There are so many people who need care and can't afford to pay." The sentence died when she noticed his expression. Jeremiah looked at her as if she were an exotic creature, something that didn't make sense in his world. "A community clinic," he repeated, not hiding his skepticism. "I know it must seem naive to you." "Seem naive." Jeremiah gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Wade, in the real world, good intentions don't pay bills or save lives. But keep playing piano for my mother. She seems different." And without another word, he entered the room, leaving Mackenzie in the corridor with her heart racing and a strange mixture of irritation and curiosity. From the other side of the door, she heard Mercedes say, "You're early today, son. Don't tell me you came to meet my favorite nurse." "I didn't come to meet anyone, Mother. I came to see how you are." "Liar," Mercedes laughed. "I saw you talking to her in the corridor. And before you ask, yes, she's everything she seems to be. And no, she's not after money. This girl has a heart the size of a cathedral." Mackenzie walked away quickly, not wanting to hear more, but she couldn't avoid the smile that bloomed on her lips. Mercedes Dean might be grumpy, but she definitely wasn't foolish, and something told her that her life was about to get much more complicated. 3 days after the encounter in the corridor, Mackenzie arrived at the hospital to find a small crowd of employees whispering nervously in the hallways. Susan, the housekeeper who sometimes accompanied Mercedes, approached her conspiratorially. "Girl, your boss came to do a surprise inspection today," she said, making air quotes. "Everyone's walking on eggshells." "My boss?" Mackenzie frowned. "Dr. Jeremiah, of course. He never sets foot in this hospital, but today he showed up early, asking for reports from every department." Mackenzie felt her stomach knot. Had she done something wrong? Had he decided she wasn't suitable to care for his mother? "Susan, do you know if he said anything about you?" The housekeeper gave a mischievous smile. "Not directly, but he asked about the piano in Mrs. Mercedes's room. And when he found out it was you who brought it, he got a very interesting expression." Before Mackenzie could respond, Dr. Brian Miller appeared in the corridor, visibly agitated. "Mackenzie, can you explain why there's an electric piano in patient Mercedes Dean's room?" His voice had a tone of reproach she knew well. "Dr. Miller, I asked permission from the coordination and—" "The coordination doesn't have authority over decisions involving the Dean family," he interrupted. "And now the CEO himself is here questioning protocols." Mackenzie took a deep breath. Dr. Miller had always been difficult with her, especially after he discovered she was at the hospital through a social scholarship. "The piano helps with Mrs. Mercedes's recovery. She sleeps better, is less anxious. That doesn't matter. What matters is following protocols." Remove the instrument immediately. But Doctor, are you questioning a direct order? Mackenzie was about to respond when a cold voice echoed through the corridor. Actually, Dr. Miller, the one questioning orders is me. Everyone turned to see Jeremiah Dean approaching with firm steps. He wore another impeccable suit, this time navy blue, and his expression was glacial. Mr. Dean, I was just... You were bothering my intern, said Jeremiah, stopping beside Mackenzie. And from what I understood, wanting to remove something that's benefiting my mother. Mackenzie caught the scent of his masculine cologne and tried to ignore how his presence affected her. But his words surprised her even more. My intern. Sir, I didn't know you had approved. Dr. Miller, let me clarify something. Jeremiah took a step toward the doctor, who immediately backed away. Any decision related to my mother's treatment goes through me. And any employee who questions Miss Wade's work will be transferred to our Akron unit. Immediately. The silence in the corridor was deafening. Dr. Miller opened and closed his mouth several times before murmuring an "excuse me" and quickly withdrawing. Mackenzie stood there not knowing what to say, while the other employees discreetly dispersed. When they were alone, she finally found her voice. Thank you, but you didn't need to. Yes, I did, he interrupted. That man is an arrogant idiot who confuses hierarchy with competence. Mackenzie couldn't help but smile. You don't like arrogant people very much, do you? Jeremiah looked at her for a moment before sketching something that almost seemed like a smile. Touché, Miss Wade. He paused. May I see you caring for my mother? Mackenzie nodded, still processing the entire situation. They walked together to Mercedes's room, where they found the elderly lady pretending to sleep, but obviously listening to everything through the half-open door. Mother, said Jeremiah, kissing her forehead, how are you feeling? Better now that you stopped making a scene in the corridor, replied Mercedes, opening her eyes with an amused sparkle. Mackenzie, my son came to defend you like a medieval knight. How romantic. Mother! Jeremiah blushed slightly. Mackenzie laughed, delighted with the dynamic between them. Mercedes might be difficult, but she clearly loved teasing her son. Mrs. Dean, would you like me to play something? Offered Mackenzie, trying to ease Jeremiah's embarrassment. Play that song you said is called Moonlight Sonata. I want to see if my son appreciates classical music as much as he appreciates expensive wines. Mackenzie went to the piano and began playing Beethoven's First Sonata. Her fingers glided over the keys naturally, and she lost herself in the melody, momentarily forgetting the tension in the room. When she finished, the silence was different. Mercedes had her eyes closed with a serene expression, and Jeremiah was watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. Where did you learn to play like that? He asked, his voice softer than she had ever heard. My grandmother. She was a music teacher before she retired. Mackenzie smiled fondly. She always said music is the language of the soul. Your grandmother is right, murmured Mercedes. Jeremiah, you should invite Mackenzie to dinner with us one of these days. Mother, it's just a suggestion, son. The girl probably eats poorly with that intern's salary. Mackenzie blushed furiously. Mrs. Dean, I manage just fine, thank you. I'm sure you do, said Jeremiah, studying her face. But my mother is right about one thing. You should accept a decent dinner from time to time. Was that an invitation? Mackenzie couldn't decipher his expression. Mr. Dean. Jeremiah, he corrected. And it's not charity, if that's what you're thinking. It's personal interest. The words hung in the air like an unexpected confession. Mercedes opened her eyes and smiled discreetly, pretending she wasn't paying attention to the conversation. Mackenzie began, but was interrupted by the entrance of Francine Anderson. The lawyer entered the room like an elegant hurricane, dressed in Chanel and carrying an imported leather briefcase. Jeremiah, darling, I was looking for you. Her smile died when she saw Mackenzie. Oh, the intern. Francine, Jeremiah sighed. What do you need? I need you to sign some documents about the expansion to New York. She approached him, deliberately ignoring Mackenzie. And I need to talk to you about certain recent decisions. Mackenzie caught the subtext immediately. Francine knew about the incident with Dr. Miller. "What kind of decisions?" asked Jeremiah, but his tone made it clear he already knew the answer. "Well," Francine gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "some people are questioning whether it's appropriate for you to directly involve yourself with basic staff issues." Basic staff? Mackenzie felt anger rising, but before she could respond, Mercedes spoke up. "Francine, dear, good thing you showed up. Mackenzie, play that song I taught you. What's it called? Oh yes, The Witch." Mackenzie had to bite her lip not to laugh. Mercedes definitely didn't like Francine. "Mrs. Dean," said Francine with a forced smile, "always so witty." "It's a gift," replied Mercedes innocently. Jeremiah watched the interaction with growing interest. There was something about the way his mother defended Mackenzie that intrigued him. Mercedes had never shown affection for employees before. "Francine, we'll discuss this later. Right now I'm visiting my mother." "Of course." Francine gave another fake smile. "Mackenzie, could you give us a moment of privacy? I'm sure there are other patients who need your attention." The condescension in the woman's tone was unbearable. Mackenzie was about to get up when Jeremiah said, "Actually, Francine, the one who needs to leave is you. As you said yourself, I'm visiting my mother, and Mackenzie is part of that visit." The embarrassment on Francine's face was almost palpable. She mumbled something about calling later and left the room with her heels clicking aggressively on the floor. "That girl has always been dramatic," observed Mercedes. "Jeremiah, you should be more careful about who you let into your circle." "Mother, Francine is a competent lawyer, and a competent snake is still a snake," retorted Mercedes. "Mackenzie, play another song for us. Something cheerful to get the bad taste out of the air." Mackenzie played a Chopin piece, but her mind was far from the keys. The dynamic she had just witnessed left her confused. Jeremiah had defended her again, but why? And why did Francine see her as a threat? When she finished playing, she noticed Jeremiah watching her with that indecipherable expression again. "Mackenzie," he said suddenly, "would you have dinner with me tomorrow?" This time, there was no ambiguity in the question. She looked at Mercedes, who was making discreet, encouraging gestures. "Yes, I accept." "Great," he smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes. "I'll pick you up at 8. After he left, Mercedes grabbed Mackenzie's hand with surprising strength. "My dear, do you have any idea what just happened?" "I think I was invited to dinner." Mercedes laughed. "You just caught the attention of the hardest man to impress that I know, and you also just became enemy number 1 of a very dangerous woman." Mackenzie felt a shiver run down her spine. "Mrs. Dean, do you think I should cancel?" "Absolutely not." Mercedes squeezed her hand even tighter. "My dear, I've been waiting 20 years to see my son show genuine interest in someone. You might be exactly what he needs." "And what if I'm not what he needs?" Mercedes smiled tenderly. "Then at least you'll eat well once in your life. Now tell me, what outfit are you going to wear?" Mackenzie stood in front of the closet in her small room at Grandma Rita's house, with all her clothes spread on the bed. Tiffany, her foster sister, sat in the armchair watching the growing despair. "Mac, you're panicking over a dinner," said Tiffany, biting an apple. "It's just food and conversation. Tiff, he has a fortune that probably equals the GDP of some small countries. I have 3 decent dresses and 1 pair of heels I bought on sale." "So what?" Tiffany shrugged. "If he can't see how amazing you are because of clothes, then he's not worth your time." Grandma Rita entered the room, carrying a cup of chamomile tea. "My granddaughter, sit here," she said, pointing to the bed. "You're worrying about the wrong things." "Grandma, I don't even know how to behave in a fancy restaurant. What if I use the wrong fork? What if I—" "Mackenzie Wade," Grandma Rita interrupted firmly. "You are the most polite, intelligent, and good-hearted girl I know. If this man can't see that, the problem is his, not yours." "But, Grandma—" "No buts. You're going to wear your navy blue dress, the one that brings out your eyes. You're going to put your hair up in a low bun, put on some lipstick, and that's it. Simplicity is elegance, my child." An hour later, Mackenzie looked at her reflection in the mirror and tried to control her nerves. The navy blue dress was simple, but it fit her body well. She had pinned her hair as her grandmother had suggested and put on the small pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother. At exactly 8 o'clock, a black BMW stopped in front of the house. Mackenzie watched from the window as Jeremiah got out of the car, and her heart jumped. He wore a dark grey suit without a tie, with the white shirt open at the first button. He looked like he had stepped out of a men's magazine. "Breathe, Mac," murmured Tiffany beside her, "and remember he's just a man. A very rich, handsome and powerful man, but still just a man." "That's not helping, Tiff." The doorbell rang, and Mackenzie went down the stairs with trembling legs. Grandma Rita opened the door before she got there. "Good evening, Mrs." Jeremiah began, clearly surprised. "Rita, I'm Mackenzie's grandmother." The lady examined him from head to toe with a critical eye. "You must be that Jeremiah fellow." "Yes, ma'am. Pleased to meet you." Grandma Rita continued her analysis. "You're handsome indeed, and you have good manners, but that doesn't mean anything." "Grandma!" Mackenzie reached the bottom of the stairs, mortified. "What?" "I'm just getting to know the young man," said Grandma Rita innocently. "Jeremiah, I hope you treat my granddaughter with respect. She's the most precious girl in the world." Jeremiah smiled, and Mackenzie noticed it was a genuine smile. "I promise to take good care of her, Mrs. Rita." "Good. Now go, before the food gets cold. And Mackenzie, come back before midnight. Cinderella already taught us what happens after that." In the car, Mackenzie tried to apologize for her grandmother, but Jeremiah interrupted her. "She reminds me of my mother," he said, maneuvering the car through the narrow streets of the neighborhood. "Protective and straight to the point. Sorry if she was a bit direct. I liked it. It's refreshing to meet people who say what they think." Mackenzie relaxed a little, watching the streets of her neighborhood give way to the luxury buildings of downtown Cleveland. It was like crossing different worlds. The restaurant was everything she had imagined, elegant, discreet, with a stunning view of Lake Erie. The maître d' led them to a reserved table, and Mackenzie tried not to show her nervousness when she saw the multiple utensils and glasses. "You're tense," observed Jeremiah after they had ordered. "A little bit," admitted Mackenzie. "I'm not used to all this." "What? Dinners?" "Dinners that cost more than my monthly salary," she said honestly. Jeremiah was silent for a moment, processing the response. "Mackenzie, may I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why did you become a nurse?" Mackenzie smiled, feeling on safer ground. "My mother died when I was 12. A car accident." Her voice softened. "I spent a lot of time at the hospital, and there was a nurse named Vivian who took care of me while I visited Mom. She taught me that caring for people was about seeing beyond the illness, seeing the person." "And your father?" Mackenzie's face closed a little. "He disappeared after the funeral, couldn't deal with the loss, and abandoned me with my grandmother." She gave a sad smile. "But in the end, I think it was better that way. Grandma Rita raised me with so much love." Jeremiah watched her attentively, and she noticed something different in his expression. It was as if he were really seeing her for the first time. "And you?" asked Mackenzie, wanting to change the focus. "Did you always want to be a businessman?" "Actually, no," Jeremiah sighed. "I wanted to be a doctor like my father. But when he died, I had to take over the family business. Someone needed to take care of the empire he had built. Do you miss it? Medicine?" "Sometimes." He took a sip of wine. "Especially when I see the work you do with my mother. There's something pure about it, caring for people without expecting anything in return. But you also care for people in a way. Your hospitals save lives." Jeremiah gave a bitter smile. "My hospitals serve those who can pay. It's different from what you do at St. Teresa's." "And does that bother you?" The question caught him by surprise. No one had ever directly questioned his business choices. "Should it bother me?" "I don't know," Mackenzie said honestly. "Only you can answer that." They were interrupted by the arrival of the food, but the conversation had taken a direction that neither expected. Mackenzie realized that behind the facade of an implacable businessman, Jeremiah carried questions and dilemmas he rarely admitted. May I ask another question? He said, cutting the fish. Of course. When you talk about opening a community clinic, are you serious? Completely serious. Mackenzie's eyes sparkled. I want to create a place where people can receive dignified care, regardless of financial condition. Palliative care especially. Many people die alone and in pain because they don't have access to adequate treatment. And how do you plan to finance this? Mackenzie laughed. I'm still figuring that out. I was thinking of starting small, maybe with donations, charity events. I know it sounds like a child's dream, but it doesn't sound like that, interrupted Jeremiah. It sounds ambitious and necessary. Mackenzie looked at him surprised. It was the first time someone didn't treat her like a naive dreamer when she talked about her plans. Do you really think so? I think you have a clear vision of what you want to do, and enough passion to make it reality. Mackenzie felt her heart accelerate. It wasn't just what he was saying, but how he was saying it. There was something in Jeremiah's voice that made her believe he really saw her, really understood her. And you, she asked, what do you really want from life? The question caught him completely off guard. Jeremiah was silent for a long moment, turning the wineglass between his fingers. Honestly, I don't know if I remember anymore, he said finally. I've spent the last 15 years building, expanding, competing. Sometimes I feel like I became a money-making machine. But does that make you happy? Happiness is a luxury that businessmen can rarely afford to pursue. Mackenzie tilted her head, studying his face. Or maybe it's the only luxury that's really worth pursuing. Before Jeremiah could respond, his phone vibrated on the table. Mackenzie saw the name Francine on the screen and noticed his expression close instantly. I need to take this, he said, getting up. It's about an important contract. Mackenzie nodded, but something in his hurry to answer Francine bothered her. While he talked outside the restaurant, she watched other couples dining and wondered if she was being foolish to think there was a real connection between them. When Jeremiah returned, his expression was tense. Everything okay? Asked Mackenzie. Work issues, nothing that can't wait until tomorrow. But Mackenzie noticed he had closed off again, returning to the controlled and distant posture she knew from the hospital. Jeremiah, may I ask you something about Francine? He stiffened. What about her? She doesn't like me much, does she? Jeremiah sighed. Francine is protective regarding family business, sometimes excessively so. Is it just about business? The question hung in the air between them. Jeremiah stared at her for a long moment before responding. Complicated to explain. Have you two ever been close? Mackenzie? Sorry, she blushed. I have no right to ask that. You do, he said, surprising her. And the answer is, for a brief period, a few years ago. But it didn't work out. Why? Jeremiah gave a humorless smile. Because she wanted to marry Lifelux, not me. Mackenzie felt something warm in her chest. There was vulnerability in that confession, an honesty she hadn't expected. And now? Are you two still? No, we're just colleagues. But Francine has difficulty accepting that. The dinner continued, but the atmosphere had subtly changed. Mackenzie noticed that every time Jeremiah opened up a little, something made him pull back again. It was as if he were fighting against himself. When they left the restaurant, he insisted on taking her home, but the silence in the car was different from the one on the way there. Tense, full of unspoken things. Mackenzie, he said when they stopped in front of the house, thank you for tonight. It was enlightening. She turned to face him, Enlightening how? You made me think about things I've long avoided thinking about, and is that good or bad? Jeremiah smiled, and for the first time that night, the smile reached his eyes. I'm still figuring that out. Mackenzie was about to get out of the car when he gently held her arm. Mackenzie, I'd like to see you again, but I need you to understand something. My world is complicated. There are people who won't like seeing me with you. Like Francine, and others. Mackenzie stared at him for a moment before smiling. Jeremiah Dean, are you warning me it's going to be difficult? I am. Then it's good to know you don't know me very well yet, she said, getting out of the car. I don't run from challenges. As he drove away, Mackenzie stood on the sidewalk watching the BMW's taillights disappear around the corner. Her head was full of questions, but her heart was full of possibilities. On the other side of town, in a luxury apartment downtown, Francine Anderson paced nervously around the living room, the phone glued to her ear. "Brian, we need to talk," she said. "Urgent." A week after the dinner, Mackenzie noticed subtle but significant changes in her routine at the hospital. Jeremiah appeared to visit Mercedes more frequently and always found an excuse to talk to Mackenzie. They were brief moments. He would ask about his mother's condition, compliment a song she had played, or simply stand watching her work with that indecipherable expression she was beginning to know well. Mercedes, of course, watched everything with the malicious pleasure of someone who finally had interesting entertainment. "My son is different," she commented while Mackenzie organized her medications. "Less grumpy. Could you have something to do with that?" "Mrs. Dean, Mr. Jeremiah is just polite," replied Mackenzie, trying to sound casual. "Polite?" Mercedes laughed. "My dear, my son can be many things, but just polite has never been one of them, especially with women." Before Mackenzie could respond, Susan entered the room with a worried expression. "Mrs. Dean, there are two people wanting to speak with you. They said it's about old family matters." Mackenzie frowned. It was unusual for Mercedes to receive visitors other than Jeremiah or hospital staff. "Who are they?" "An older man said his name is Robert Wade, and a young woman, blonde. They didn't give names." Mackenzie felt her blood freeze. Robert Wade was the name of the father who had abandoned her. "Mrs. Dean, I need to step out for a few minutes," she said, her voice trembling. "Of course, dear. But if you need anything, call me." Mackenzie left the room with wobbly legs and headed to the main corridor, where she saw a grey-haired man and a blonde woman of approximately 30 talking to the receptionist. Her heart raced when she recognized the profile of the man she hadn't seen in 14 years. "Dad?" The word came out almost in a whisper. Robert Wade turned, and Mackenzie saw her own chin, her own dark eyes in the aged face of the man before her. "Mackenzie." "My daughter." The blonde woman beside him smiled, but there was something calculating in that smile that Mackenzie didn't like. "This is Patricia, my wife," said Robert, clearly uncomfortable. "And you're more beautiful than I imagined." Mackenzie felt a mixture of anger, hurt, and confusion. 14 years of silence, and now he appeared as if nothing had happened. "What do you want here?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I heard you're taking care of Jeremiah Dean's mother," said Patricia before Robert could respond. "What an interesting coincidence." "Patricia," Robert murmured, a clear warning. "What do you mean by coincidence?" Mackenzie felt a chill run down her spine. "Darling, I think you deserve to know the truth about your mother," said Patricia with false concern. "About how she really died." Mackenzie felt the ground disappear from under her feet. "My mother died in a car accident. I know very well how—" "She died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital," interrupted Robert, avoiding his daughter's gaze. "But it wasn't a common accident, Mackenzie. The car that hit her was driven by someone drunk, someone important, someone who was never punished." "What are you talking about?" Patricia approached, feigning consolation. "Your mother, Mackenzie, worked as a nurse in the first hospital of the Dean family. And on the night she died, she was returning from a difficult conversation with Charles Dean." Mackenzie's world stopped. "Charles Dean, Jeremiah's father. You're lying." "Your mother discovered irregularities in the hospital," continued Robert, finally finding courage to speak. "Expired medications being used on poor patients, equipment with delayed maintenance. She was going to report it, and Charles Dean convinced her not to," added Patricia. "He offered money, threatened her job. Your mother left that meeting distraught, and on the way home—" "Stop," Mackenzie murmured, her legs failing. "The driver who killed your mother was Charles Dean's nephew," said Robert, his voice heavy with guilt. "A rich kid, drunk, driving his uncle's car. The family covered everything up. They paid the police, bought the witnesses' silence. No one was punished." Mackenzie leaned against the wall, trying to process the information. her mother, Jeremiah. Everything was connected in a horrible way. Why did you never tell me this? Robert lowered his head. Because I was afraid. The Deans had power, money. They threatened to sue me for defamation if I said anything. And I was a coward. I preferred to run away. And now? Mackenzie's voice was loaded with pain and anger. After 14 years, you show up to tell me this? Patricia and Robert exchanged a look. Mackenzie, you have a right to know the truth, said Patricia, and you have a right to compensation. The Deans owe you and your mother's memory. Compensation? Mackenzie felt nauseated. Darling, you're getting involved with the son of the man who destroyed your family, said Patricia with false concern. Don't you think you deserve to know this before it's too late? Mackenzie looked at her father, searching in him for some vestige of the man who had once loved her. But all she saw was a broken man, manipulated by his opportunistic wife. You want money? She said, finally understanding. You didn't come here for me. You came because you know I'm close to the Deans and saw an opportunity. Mackenzie, began Robert. Get out, she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her own voice. Both of you get out. Now, daughter, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Mackenzie exploded, drawing attention from other employees in the corridor. You disappeared when I needed you, and now you come back with lies and blackmail. They're not lies, Mackenzie, said Patricia, and you know it. Why else would Mercedes Dean be so interested in you? Why is Jeremiah suddenly so attentive? The words were like a punch to Mackenzie's stomach. She thought of Mercedes, of the affectionate way the elderly woman treated her, of the guilt she sometimes saw in her eyes. She thought of Jeremiah, of how he had appeared in her life exactly when she began caring for his mother. Do they know who you are, Mackenzie? Continued Patricia mercilessly. Are they not trying to buy your silence with affection and expensive dinners? Mackenzie felt tears burning her eyes, but refused to let them fall in front of those two. Leave, now, and don't come back. After they left, Mackenzie stood in the empty corridor, trying to organize her thoughts. Her mother, Charles Dean. Did Mercedes know? Did Jeremiah know? Mackenzie. A familiar voice made her turn. Jeremiah was standing a few meters behind her with a worried expression. How long had he been there? How much had he heard? Are you okay? I heard raised voices. Mackenzie stared at him, trying to read his expression. Was there genuine concern there? Or guilt? Jeremiah, may I ask you a question? Of course. Do you know anything about my mother? The question caught him completely off guard. He frowned, confused. Your mother? You told me she died when you were a child. Her name was Helen Wade. She worked as a nurse in your family's hospital 14 years ago. Mackenzie watched his face carefully, looking for any sign of recognition. For a moment, she saw only genuine confusion. Then something changed in his expression. Helen Wade, he murmured, as if the name awakened a distant memory. Do you remember her? Jeremiah ran his hand through his hair, visibly disturbed. I remember a nurse who had problems with my father. But that was a long time ago, Mackenzie. I barely got involved with the hospitals at that time. What kind of problems? I don't know for sure. I remember my father was stressed for several weeks, talking about an employee who was causing problems, but I never knew details. Why? What does this have to do with... Jeremiah stopped mid-sentence, understanding slowly dawning in his eyes. My God, he whispered. Helen Wade was your mother? Mackenzie nodded, watching horror grow on his face. Mackenzie, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. And your mother? Does Mercedes know? The hesitation in his response was all the confirmation she needed. Jeremiah, does your mother know who I am? I need to talk to her. I need to understand what happened. Mackenzie felt her heart breaking. During all those weeks, Mercedes had known exactly who she was. The affection, the protection, the way she had defended Mackenzie. It had all been disguised guilt. That was why, she murmured. That was why she took an interest in me. It wasn't because she liked me. It was guilt. Mackenzie, it's not that simple, isn't it? She stared at him with tears in her eyes. And you, Jeremiah, when did you find out? I didn't find out. Mackenzie, I swear I didn't know who you were when I invited you to dinner. I still don't know exactly what happened to your mother." Mackenzie wanted to believe him. She desperately wanted to believe that the feelings between them were real, that they weren't based on guilt or manipulation. But Patricia's words echoed in her mind. "I need to go," she said, stepping away. "Mackenzie, wait. Let's talk to my mother together. Let's find out the truth." "The truth!" She gave a bitter smile. "The truth is that I'm the daughter of the woman your father silenced. The truth is that your family destroyed mine. The truth is that all of this was a lie." "It wasn't a lie," said Jeremiah desperately. "What I feel for you wasn't a lie." Mackenzie stopped, her heart beating fast. It was the first time he admitted having feelings for her. "How can I know that, Jeremiah? How can I know what's real?" Before he could respond, Mercedes' weak voice reached them. "Because I'm going to tell you both exactly what happened." Both turned to see the elderly woman leaning against the room door, supported by Susan. Her face was pale, but her expression was determined. "Mother, you should be resting." "Enough, Jeremiah," said Mercedes with authority. "It's time to face the past." Mackenzie stared at her, a mixture of anger and pain in her chest. "You knew. All along, you knew who I was." "Yes," admitted Mercedes, "I knew, and now I'm going to tell you why." Mercedes asked everyone to sit in her room. Susan brought extra chairs, and for the first time in months, the elderly woman seemed fragile and small in her hospital bed. Jeremiah sat beside his mother, while Mackenzie kept her distance close to the window. "Helen Wade was the best nurse we had at the hospital," began Mercedes, her voice weaker than usual. "Dedicated, caring, competent, and pregnant with a beautiful little girl." Mackenzie swallowed hard. Mercedes was talking about when she was still in her mother's womb. "Your mother discovered things she shouldn't have discovered, Mackenzie. Expired medications, being passed on to Medicaid patients, equipment with delayed maintenance, false spreadsheets. The hospital was going through financial difficulties, and Charles, my husband, made terrible choices." "Mother," murmured Jeremiah, visibly shocked. "Let me finish, son." Mercedes took a deep breath. "Helen came to talk to me first. As head nurse, she thought I should know, and I was a coward. I told her not to get involved, that those things happened in all hospitals. But Helen had principles." Mercedes's voice trembled. "She went to talk to Charles, and my husband. He wasn't a bad man, Mackenzie, but he was proud and desperate. He offered money for her to stay quiet. When she refused, he threatened to fire her, and when she said she was going to the press, he threatened her in other ways." Mackenzie felt tears running down her face. "Your mother left that office distraught. I tried to talk to her, but she wouldn't listen to me. She said she was going to report everything, that it didn't matter what happened to her. And that night she died," completed Mackenzie. Her voice choked. "Charles's nephew was drunk," continued Mercedes. "An 18-year-old boy, his sister's son. He took the car without permission and—" She closed her eyes. "When we found out what had happened, Charles panicked. If they discovered that Helen was fleeing from a meeting with him, that she had compromising information, he covered everything up," said Mackenzie bitterly. "He paid the boy's family to send him out of the country. He bought the police's silence. And he threatened your father so he wouldn't say anything." Jeremiah was pale. My father did this. Your father was terrified, Jeremiah. The whole hospital could collapse. Hundreds of jobs. The family's reputation. He justified himself saying that Helen was dead anyway, that it was no use destroying more lives." "But he ruined mine," murmured Mackenzie. "And my father's." "Yes," admitted Mercedes. "And I was an accomplice to that. I could have stopped Charles, could have done the right thing, but I chose to protect my family." The silence in the room was deafening. Mackenzie looked out the window, trying to process all that information. Her mother had died trying to do the right thing, and she had been silenced forever. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked finally. Mercedes stared at her with eyes full of tears. "Because when you entered this room 3 months ago, it was like seeing Helen again. The same eyes, the same smile, the same kindness. I thought it was a coincidence at first, but when you told me your last name, you knew from the first day. Yes. And I saw an opportunity to try to repair somehow the harm we caused. I can't bring Helen back, but I can take care of her daughter. Mackenzie turned to face Mercedes, anger bubbling in her chest. Take care of me? You think you can buy my forgiveness with fake affection? It wasn't fake. Mercedes struggled to sit up. Mackenzie, the affection I feel for you is real. Yes, it started with guilt, but it became genuine love. You gave me back the will to live. And you, Mackenzie turned to Jeremiah, when did you find out the truth? Jeremiah took a deep breath. 2 weeks ago, my mother told me after our dinner. She was afraid I would fall in love with you without knowing the truth. Fall in love? Mackenzie laughed bitterly. How ironic. The son of the man who killed my mother falling in love with me. Mackenzie, and you continued going out with me knowing all this? I wanted to tell you, but my mother asked me to wait, said she wanted to find the right way to manipulate me. It's not manipulation. Jeremiah stood up. What I feel for you is real, Mackenzie. It has nothing to do with my father or the past. It has everything to do with it, she exploded. You used me to ease your guilty conscience. You treated me like a charity project. That's not true, Mercedes said weakly. Isn't it? Then explain this to me. Why did I never know that my mother worked here? Why did my father run away and never come back? Why did you think you had the right to decide what was best for me? No one answered. I need to get out of here, said Mackenzie, heading for the door. Mackenzie, please, implored Jeremiah. Don't leave like this. We can talk. We can work this out. Work it out. She turned to him, her eyes shining with anger and pain. Jeremiah, your family destroyed mine. My mother died because your father wanted to protect dirty business. I grew up without a father because he was threatened and intimidated. And now I discover that all of this, everything that happened between us, was built on lies and guilt. But the feelings are true. How can I know that? How can I trust anything you tell me? Mackenzie left the room without looking back, ignoring Jeremiah's desperate calls. She needed to get out of there, needed to breathe, needed to think. But when she reached the main corridor, she found a small crowd of employees, including Dr. Miller and Francine, clearly waiting for some kind of drama. Mackenzie realized that the discussion in the room had been heard by more people than she had imagined. Mackenzie, Francine approached with a fake smile of concern. I heard you're going through a difficult time. If you need to talk, leave her alone, Francine, said Susan, appearing beside Mackenzie. I'm just offering support, said Francine innocently. After all, it must be terrible to discover that certain people approached you for questionable motives. Mackenzie stared at her, realizing that Francine knew something. She had probably been the one who brought Robert and Patricia there. It was you, said Mackenzie slowly. You brought my father here. Francine shrugged. I just thought you deserved to know the truth about your situation, especially considering how certain people are taking advantage of your naivety. Francine! Jeremiah's furious voice echoed through the corridor. He approached with long strides, his expression angrier than Mackenzie had ever seen. What did you do? Me? Francine feigned surprise. I just gave Mackenzie the information she deserved to have. Information that you and your mother were hiding from her. You have no right. I do! Francine got excited. Someone needs to protect LifeLux's interests. You're behaving irresponsibly, Jeremiah, getting emotionally involved with her. When you should be focused on business. Mackenzie watched the discussion with a mixture of anger and disgust. Even at that moment, they were talking about her as if she were an object, a problem to be solved. Enough, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. All of you, enough. The corridor fell silent. Francine, you are a petty and manipulative woman who uses others' pain to get what you want. Dr. Miller, you are a coward who hides behind hierarchies to mistreat people. And you, she looked at Jeremiah, you are too rich to understand what real responsibility is. Mackenzie took a deep breath, feeling a strange strength growing inside her. I want everyone to know something. I will continue caring for Mercedes Dean until she no longer needs me, because unlike you, I know what commitment is. But when this is over, I will leave here, and you will never see me again. Mackenzie, began Jeremiah. And you, she interrupted him, you can keep your guilt, your money, and your perfect life, because I prefer to be poor and honest than rich and complicit. Mackenzie left the hospital with her head held high, leaving behind a silent corridor and a man with a broken heart. When she got home, she found Tiffany and Grandma Rita waiting in the living room, clearly worried. Mac, what happened? You look like you've seen the world end. Mackenzie threw herself on the sofa and finally let the tears flow. Grandma, I think I found out how Mom really died. And between sobs and hugs, she told everything to the two most important women in her life, feeling like her world had completely collapsed. But deep in her chest, very small, a flame of determination still burned. Mercedes was dying, and Mackenzie wasn't going to abandon her now. It didn't matter what had happened in the past. Some things were bigger than personal pain, and some promises were worth more than wounded pride. 3 weeks passed since the devastating revelation, and Mackenzie kept her promise. She continued caring for Mercedes with the same dedication as before, but now there was a professional distance that didn't exist previously. She arrived, fulfilled her obligations with excellence, talked politely with the patient, but the spontaneous affection had given way to respectful and cold cordiality. Mercedes felt the difference like a daily stab wound. Mackenzie, can you play piano today? Asked the elderly woman on a particularly difficult morning after a night of intense pain. Of course, Mrs. Dean. Any preference? That song you played on the first day. Einaudi. Mackenzie nodded and went to the piano. But when she began to play, Mercedes realized that something essential had been lost. The music was technically perfect, but lacked the soul that once touched her heart. You're still angry with me, said Mercedes when the music ended. Mackenzie turned, maintaining a neutral expression. I'm not angry, Mrs. Dean. I'm doing my job. But you're not doing it with love. The observation hurt more than Mackenzie expected. Love won't change the past, she replied, organizing the morning medications. No, but it can change the future. Mackenzie stopped what she was doing and stared at the elderly woman. Mrs. Dean, with all due respect, my future no longer includes fantasies about perfect families or fairy tales. I learned that the real world is more complicated than I thought. And you also learned to protect yourself by building walls around your heart. Mackenzie didn't respond, but Mercedes saw her hands tremble slightly while preparing the medication. At that moment, Susan entered the room with a strange expression. Mrs. Dean, there's an event tonight, isn't there? LifeLux's charity dinner? Mercedes sighed. Yes, the annual dinner. But obviously I won't be able to attend. It's just that... Susan hesitated. I just heard a very interesting conversation between Mrs. Francine and Dr. Miller. They're planning something for tonight, something related to Mackenzie. Mackenzie looked up. What do you mean? I couldn't hear everything, but I heard your father's name being mentioned, and something about exposing the truth publicly. Mercedes sat up in bed, alarm in her eyes. Those vipers are going to try to use the dinner to publicly humiliate you, she said. Mackenzie, you can't let this happen. Mrs. Dean, I'm not even going to be there. I have nothing to do with LifeLux events. But they can mention you, you can be sure. Francine is capable of anything to hurt Jeremiah and definitively drive you away from him. Mackenzie felt a knot in her stomach. Francine had demonstrated what she was capable of by bringing her father to the hospital. And what do you suggest I do? Show up at an elite event without an invitation? Mercedes smiled for the first time in weeks, and Mackenzie recognized the mischievous gleam in her eyes. My dear, you're going to show up at that dinner, and you're going to be stunning. Mrs. Dean. Susan, called the elderly woman. Call that French stylist, the one who always arranges clothes for family events. Tell her I need a dress for a young woman, size 6 for tonight. Mrs. Dean, I can't accept. You can, and you will. The determination in the elderly woman's voice was absolute. If Francine wants a show, let's give her a show, but this time you won't be the victim. A few hours later, Mackenzie found herself in Mercedes's apartment, who had insisted on leaving the hospital for a few hours, being prepared by a team of professionals that the elderly woman herself had hired. The dress was stunning, a navy blue silk model that highlighted her eyes and fell perfectly on her body. Her hair was pinned up in an elegant bun with some loose strands framing her face. The makeup was subtle, but highlighted her natural beauty. "My God, Mackenzie," murmured Tiffany, who had been called to accompany everything. "You look... wow." "Are you nervous?" asked Mercedes, watching Mackenzie look at herself in the mirror. "Terrified," admitted Mackenzie. "I don't even know how to behave at an event like this." "With your head held high and remembering who you are," said Mercedes firmly. "You are Mackenzie Wade, daughter of Helen Wade, one of the most upright women I ever knew, and you inherited that integrity." Mackenzie took a deep breath, trying to gather courage. "Mrs. Dean, why are you doing this? After everything—" "Because you deserve justice, my dear. And because—" Mercedes hesitated, "because maybe it's my last chance to do the right thing." LifeLux's charity dinner was held at Cleveland's most luxurious hotel. Mackenzie arrived by taxi. She had refused the limousine Mercedes had tried to hire, and stood for a few minutes at the entrance, watching the city's elite enter the ballroom. Women covered in jewels, men in tuxedos, photographers recording every moment. It was a world completely different from hers. "Excuse me, ma'am," said the doorman. "Do you have an invitation?" Mackenzie showed the invitation Mercedes had provided and entered the ballroom, feeling all attention turned to her. Conversation stopped, people whispered, and she realized she was being watched as an intruder. And then she saw him. Jeremiah was on the other side of the ballroom, talking to a group of businessmen wearing a tuxedo that made him look like he'd stepped out of a movie. When their eyes met, he froze, as if he had seen a ghost. Mackenzie headed to the bar, trying to seem confident, but feeling completely out of place. "Whiskey, please," she asked the bartender. "Wow, the nurse decided to show up," said a familiar voice behind her. Mackenzie turned to face Francine, stunning in a red dress that probably cost more than Mackenzie's annual salary. "Francine," greeted Mackenzie politely. "I must say you look presentable. Did Mercedes pay for the makeover?" Mackenzie felt the provocation, but maintained her composure. "It's a beautiful event," she said, ignoring the question. "It is. A pity that not everyone here really belongs to this environment." Francine smiled maliciously. "But don't worry, dear. Soon everyone will know exactly who you are." Before Mackenzie could respond, Dr. Miller joined them. "Mackenzie, what a surprise to see you here." His smile was false and predatory. "Does Jeremiah know you came?" "He didn't need to know," replied Mackenzie. "Of course not," said Francine. "After all, why would she tell, especially considering certain recent revelations about her family?" The condescension in the woman's tone was unbearable. Mackenzie felt her blood chill, but maintained a neutral expression. "What are you talking about?" "Oh dear," Francine feigned surprise. "Don't you know? Your father has been talking to the press. He told a very interesting story about the Dean family." Mackenzie felt the ground disappear from under her feet. Had her father spoken to journalists? "Apparently certain irregularities from the past are coming to light," continued Dr. Miller. "Old scandals, mysterious deaths, destroyed families. It's quite a story. And imagine," added Francine, "when they discover that the victim's daughter was, let's say, intimately involved with the responsible family. What a touching story of forgiveness and reconciliation, don't you think?" Mackenzie realized she was being set up. They had manipulated her father into talking to the press, and now they were about to use it to publicly destroy both her and Jeremiah. "You are despicable," she said quietly. "We are practical," corrected Francine. "And now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go. Soon the most interesting part of the evening will begin." Francine walked away with Dr. Miller, leaving Mackenzie alone at the bar. With her heart racing and her mind spinning, She needed to get out of there before it was too late, but when she turned to leave, she bumped directly into Jeremiah. "Mackenzie," he said, his voice hoarse, "you look beautiful." For a moment, she lost herself in his eyes, remembering all the good moments they had shared. But then she remembered where she was and why she had gone there. "Jeremiah, I need to warn you about something. Francine and Dr. Miller are planning—" "Ladies and gentlemen," the presenter's voice echoed through the ballroom, "I ask for your attention for a special announcement." Mackenzie felt her stomach churn. It was too late. "Tonight, besides celebrating another year of Life Lux's success, we have a very special story to share with you," continued the presenter. "A story about justice, truth, and second chances." Dr. Miller went up on stage with a microphone in his hand, a satisfied smile on his face. "My friends, you know that Life Lux has always been synonymous with excellence and transparency. But today we discovered that there are people among us who tried to tarnish our reputation with lies and slander." Mackenzie felt Jeremiah stiffen beside her. "Recently, a desperate man tried to blackmail our company with false accusations about events that supposedly happened more than a decade ago. This man, Robert Wade, claimed that his deceased wife had been silenced by the Dean family after discovering irregularities in our hospitals. The entire ballroom was in absolute silence. "But what makes this story even more interesting," continued Dr. Miller, "is that this man's daughter, a young woman named Mackenzie Wade, managed to infiltrate our team and get intimately close to the Dean family. A clear attempt to blackmail and manipulate our CEO." Mackenzie heard murmurs throughout the entire ballroom. All attention was turned to her. "Mackenzie Wade is here with us tonight," said Dr. Miller, pointing directly at her, "and I believe she would like to explain her true intentions." The entire ballroom turned to look at Mackenzie. She felt hundreds of eyes judging her, malicious whispers, satisfied smiles from people who loved seeing someone be publicly humiliated. Jeremiah stepped forward. "Dr. Miller, it's a lie," said a clear and strong voice. Everyone turned to see Mercedes Dean entering the ballroom, supported by Susan, but with an erect and dignified posture. She walked slowly toward the stage, her elegant black dress and her determined expression. "Mother!" Jeremiah ran to support her. "You shouldn't be here." "It's exactly where I need to be," replied Mercedes, taking the microphone from Dr. Miller's hands. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. "My friends," began Mercedes, her voice carrying all the authority of decades as matriarch of the Dean family, "you just heard a distorted version of the truth. Now you're going to hear the real version." Dr. Miller tried to interrupt, but Mercedes silenced him with a look. "Helen Wade was an exceptional nurse who worked in our hospitals 14 years ago. She discovered irregularities that my late husband, Charles Dean, tried to hide. And when she threatened to expose those irregularities, my husband," Mercedes paused, gathering strength, "my husband intimidated and threatened her." The murmur in the ballroom grew. On the night Helen left that meeting, distraught and frightened, she was killed by a drunk driver, a driver who was my husband's nephew, and Charles covered up the case, threatened witnesses, and destroyed the Wade family's life to protect our secrets. Now the ballroom was in complete uproar. "Mackenzie Wade," continued Mercedes, looking directly at the young woman, "didn't infiltrate anywhere. She was assigned to care for me because she's the best caregiver I've ever had. And when I discovered who she was, I saw an opportunity to try to repair a terrible injustice." "Mrs. Dean," Dr. Miller tried to regain control, "you are clearly disturbed." "I'm dying," said Mercedes simply, causing a deadly silence in the ballroom. "I don't have time for political lies or power games. I only have time for the truth." Mackenzie felt tears running down her face. "The truth is that Mackenzie Wade has more integrity in her little finger than most people in this ballroom have in their entire bodies," continued Mercedes. "The truth is that she forgave a family that destroyed hers, and cared for me with more affection than I deserve. The truth is that my son fell in love with her not through manipulation or blackmail, but because she is extraordinary." Mercedes turned to Dr. Miller and Francine. "And the truth is that you two orchestrated this humiliation because you're afraid. Afraid that Jeremiah will find happiness outside the circle of vultures you represent." The ballroom was in complete chaos now, with people talking agitatedly, photographers flashing, and journalists frantically taking notes. "But there's one more truth you need to know," said Mercedes, breathing with difficulty. "In my will, half of my personal inheritance will be destined to create a community palliative care clinic administered by Mackenzie Wade, not as charity or reparation, but as recognition that she represents everything this family should have been from the beginning." Mercedes dropped the microphone and staggered. Jeremiah immediately supported her, and Mackenzie ran to help. "Let's get out of here," whispered Jeremiah. But before they could move, Francine went up on stage. "Don't believe this charade," she screamed into the microphone. "Mercedes is senile and being manipulated. Mackenzie Wade is an opportunist who—" "Enough!" Jeremiah's voice echoed through the ballroom like thunder. He went up on stage, took the microphone from Francine, and stared at her with a fury that made her back away. "Dr. Miller, you're fired," he said, his voice cutting. "Francine, you too. Security, please escort these two people out, immediately." "Jeremiah, you can't." "I can, and I am," he interrupted. "And to all of you who enjoyed watching this attempted humiliation, let me clarify something. Mackenzie Wade is the most upright woman I've ever met, and anyone who dares to defame her will have to deal with me personally." He turned to Mackenzie, who was helping Mercedes sit in a chair. "Mackenzie, I know I don't deserve it, but may I speak with you? Privately?" Mackenzie looked at Mercedes, who nodded weakly. "Go, my dear. I'm fine with Susan." Mackenzie followed Jeremiah to a private room adjacent to the ballroom. When the door closed, they were alone for the first time since the revelation. "Mackenzie, Jeremiah, no," she interrupted him. "Please, don't make this harder than it already is." "Harder?" "Mackenzie, my mother just publicly announced that she loves you like a daughter and is leaving half her inheritance for you to realize your dream. How can this be difficult?" Mackenzie laughed bitterly. "You don't understand, do you? Your mother is dying, and the last thing she wants is to see you unhappy. She did this out of guilt, Jeremiah, not love." "And you?" he asked, taking a step toward her. "What did you do for love?" Mackenzie stared at him, feeling her heart break. "I fell in love with the wrong man." "Why wrong?" "Because we're from different worlds, because our story began with lies, because every time I look at you, I remember that your family destroyed mine." Jeremiah closed his eyes, the pain visible on his face. "What if I change? What if I do differently? What if I prove I can be the man you deserve?" "Jeremiah, Mackenzie, I'm in love with you. Completely, hopelessly in love. And I know I messed everything up. I know my family did terrible things, but—" he held her hands, "but I can't believe that what we feel for each other means nothing." Mackenzie felt tears running down her face. "It means everything," she whispered, "and that's why it hurts so much." "Then don't give up on us," he pleaded. "Give me a chance to make things right. Let me prove I can be different from what my father was." Mackenzie looked into his eyes and saw everything she had always dreamed of: love, sincerity, determination. But she also saw the reality of their situation. "Jeremiah, even if I wanted to, how would this work? Your family, my friends, everyone has an opinion about us, and they always will. Then we make our own opinion," he said simply. "We create our own version of the story." Before Mackenzie could respond, Susan opened the door. "Mackenzie, dear, you need to come. Mrs. Dean isn't feeling well." They ran back to the ballroom, where they found Mercedes pale and breathing with difficulty. "Mother, let's go to the hospital," said Jeremiah. "No," Mercedes held Mackenzie's hand. "I want to go home, to my bed, my room. If it's going to be today, let it be in my home." Mackenzie and Jeremiah exchanged glances, immediately understanding what she was saying. "Mrs. Dean." "Mackenzie, my dear girl," Mercedes smiled weakly. "Thank you for giving me the best 3 months of my life. You reminded me of how it is to love someone selflessly." "Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine." "No, I won't. And that's okay." Mercedes squeezed her hand. "But promise me something. Don't let the past destroy your future. Your mother wouldn't want that." Mackenzie nodded, crying openly now. "And Jeremiah," Mercedes turned to her son, "be better than your father was. You have this chance." An hour later, Mercedes Dean died peacefully in her own bed, with Mackenzie and Jeremiah's hands intertwined over hers, while Mackenzie softly played Moonlight Sonata on the bedroom piano. And in the silence that followed the last note, Mackenzie finally understood that some love stories are bigger than pain, and that sometimes forgiving isn't about forgetting the past, but about choosing to build a different future. Epilogue. 6 months later. The Helen Wade Community Clinic was inaugurated on a sunny Saturday morning in Cleveland's Old Brooklyn neighborhood. It was small, simple, but equipped with everything Mackenzie had dreamed of: palliative care rooms, modern equipment donated by Lifelux, and a music room with a white grand piano. Mackenzie was at the entrance, receiving the first patients, when Tiffany approached with a mischievous smile. "Mac, there's a guy out there with an old dog and a face like he's been fasting. I think it's your boyfriend." Mackenzie laughed, the first genuine laugh in months, and went out to find Jeremiah standing on the sidewalk, holding General on a leash and looking completely out of place in the middle of the cobblestone street of Old Brooklyn. "Did you come to see our clinic?" she asked. "I came to see if you need anything," he replied, "and to bring this guy here who was missing you." General ran to Mackenzie, who picked him up and received several licks on her face. "How are you?" asked Jeremiah, watching her carefully. "Good, tired, but good," Mackenzie smiled. "And you? How has it been running Lifelux alone?" "Revealing," he admitted. "I'm implementing some changes, a free care program, partnerships with public hospitals. I think my mother would be proud." Mackenzie nodded, touched by the change she saw in him. "Jeremiah, Mackenzie, may I ask you a question?" he interrupted, nervous. "Of course. Do you think it's possible to start over, from scratch? With no past, no guilt, nothing but two people who want to try to be happy together?" Mackenzie looked at him for a long moment, seeing not the powerful CEO or the heir to an empire, but simply Jeremiah, the man who had changed her life, who had fought for her, who had chosen to do differently. "I think Mercedes would say it's possible," she replied finally. "And you? What does Mackenzie say?" She smiled, feeling for the first time in months that the future could be good. "Mackenzie says she's willing to try." Jeremiah smiled too, a smile that reached his eyes and illuminated his entire face. "Then may I invite you to dinner? Nothing fancy, maybe pizza with Grandma Rita and Tiffany." "I accept," said Mackenzie, "but only if you promise not to complain when Grandma starts interrogating you about your intentions." "I promise," laughed Jeremiah. "And my intentions, just so you know, are completely serious." "Good to know," said Mackenzie, approaching him. When they kissed there in front of the clinic, with General barking happily and the first patients watching with amused smiles, Mackenzie felt she was finally home, not the home of bricks and cement, but the home of the heart. That place where you can be completely yourself and still be loved. And maybe, she thought, that's what fairy tales really talk about. Not perfect endings, but courageous beginnings. Of people who choose to love despite the pain. Of stories that transform when you decide to write a different ending. The end. Did you enjoy this story of Mackenzie and Jeremiah? If you were moved by this journey of love, forgiveness, and new beginnings, please give this video a like so I know I managed to touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel to receive more stories like this one, which blend romance, drama, and that touch of humor that makes everything more enjoyable. And don't forget to hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever a new love story arrives here. Your participation helps me continue creating quality content and allows other people, just like you, to be moved by these heartfelt narratives. Thank you so much for reading all the way through, and see you in the next story.